All right. Well, today we've got to talk about Iran because this is starting to look less like political theater and more like the runway to a real conflict right now. President Trump just issued what is basically an ultimatum: come to the table and accept a new nuclear agreement, no nuclear weapons, or the United States is prepared to hit Iran again. And he's warning the next strike would be, quote, far worse than the last one. He says a massive armada is heading towards Iran right now. No nuclear weapons. Time is running out. It's truly of the essence. As I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't, and there was Operation Midnight Hammer, major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. And this massive armada is moving towards Iran, led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, and he framed it as a ready-to-go force that can act quickly if necessary. So the immediate question is this: is this leverage for negotiations? Are they actually interested in any kind of negotiations?
Well, that would be a good question, my darling. If the subject of the deal had not been about completely different things. So first it was about whether or not they might have a nuclear arsenal. Then it was about whether or not they're building conventional missiles. Then it was back to, and then it was whether or not they are, hurting their own protesters. And now it's back to nukes. So can you follow this? Like, what's the deal about? The deal, it could be about anything the United States decides it is in any given time. It's nonsensical. Or is this a countdown to a shooting war? That's the other question. Former UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter joins us now to analyze this latest buildup, this latest bluster. Scott, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me. I was going to divert for a moment and do that whole that whole Rumble wallet thing.
Yeah, as someone who was debanked, I know I couldn't help it. I'm reading that. I'm like, oh shit, Scott was just debanked like 2 weeks ago. They just shut his bank account down. Like, unbelievable. So, yeah, our hearts go out to you on that. Sorry to hear that. But this is indicative, of course, of control, and they don't like what you're saying. So they go after people that they don't like what you're saying. And what you've been saying about Iran is probably rubbing people the wrong way. So what do you make of this latest taunt by President Trump just a short time ago?
Well, the thing about Trump is that we know that twice before he's backed down when it comes to decisive engagement with Iran. When the Global Hawk was shot down, he was all in favor of, bombing Iranian air defense sites. And he was warned by smarter people in the national security system that if he started a conflict with Iran, it wasn't going to go the way he thought it would, that the United States would be embarrassed, humiliated, and would take months, if not years, to build up the military force to prevail. And so Trump backed off, claiming that he was sparing Iranian lives because he's such a great humanitarian. The most recent time is what just happened a few weeks ago with, where Trump basically said that they were going to bomb Iran in support of the protesters, and then he pulled back. My first take on that is that somebody smarter than Trump again whispered in his ear and warned him of the consequences. We know that Israel and Saudi Arabia allegedly made phone calls saying to stop the bombing. But the more I reflect on it, the more I take a look at what's happening right now, I think that that was all part of the plan, that what we're seeing right now play out is part of a campaign strategy that, unfolded when the United States and others doctored the Iranian currency, leading to an economic crisis that in turn led to demonstrations in the streets that were hijacked by Mossad and CIA-controlled violent agitators who instigated, massive acts of violence that triggered Iranian security response. I believe now that that was called shaking the tree, an old CIA tactic that I'm very familiar with, where you set up a whole monitoring system and then you go in and you jingle and see what happens. And I think the United States and the Israelis were able to determine specifically, what assets responded to what crises, where they're located, who controls them, things of that nature. And this has populated the target deck that we're going to use. Israel has made it clear that the next strike against Iran has to be the last strike against Iran. Israel said that, they're ready to absorb 700 ballistic missiles coming out of Iran so long as Iran, the theocracy, is removed from power. So I think this attack, if it goes forward, will be an all-out full spectrum assault on Iran that involves not just airstrikes that are seeking to suppress Iran's security mechanisms, but I think you're going to see cyber attacks. We know that the National Security Agency and the Cyber Command have been implanting viruses throughout the Iranian infrastructure, both in terms of industry, but also just day-to-day life, how to turn on and off the lights, traffic lights, things of that nature. I think you're going to see the shutting down of Iran in order to create chaos, to create absolute dysfunction, suppress the security system, and then have the paramilitary organizations that did not participate in the last go-around, the Mujahideen al-Khalq, the monarchists, the Baluch liberation people, Avaz, the Arabs, the Kurds, the Azeris, all of these groups that the CIA and Mossad have been funding over the years. I think they're going to make a bum rush on the major cities, including Tehran. And I think they're going to seek to remove the Iranian government from power. It has to be done quick. Israel, you can't absorb missile attacks forever. But, that's the plan. I don't think it'll succeed. I think it'll fail. I think Iran will shut down the Strait of Hormuz, shut down oil production, kill a lot of Americans, destroy Israel. And hopefully somebody very smart is whispering this reality in Trump's ear, up to including the fact that we could lose an aircraft carrier if we're not careful. So this isn't the Houthi that we're playing with. This is Iran recognizing that, they're not going to make a deal because you can't make a deal. Karen Knissel, she's a former Austrian foreign minister who currently is in St. Petersburg, head of the Gorky Center. She bristles when she hears the term deal, especially when it comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. She says the term deal it's the language of gangsters, of thugs, of criminals, of the mafia. Iran doesn't want to deal with a gangster, thug, criminal, or the mafia. They don't want a deal. Iran wants a treaty, a binding agreement. They learned the last time they made a deal with an American president, that deal can be broken by another American president on a whim. And that was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran's not going to make a deal with Donald Trump. It could sign a treaty with the world, but that's not going to back down under the threats right now. So if this happens, this will be an existential fight that will bring about devastation for all parties involved. And just so all the Americans watching this, it means the end of the dollar, the end of your economy, the end of the standard of living that you're currently enjoying. You're going to see an economic collapse in the United States that'll make the Great Depression pale in comparison. We can't handle what's about to come. So call your representatives, have them call generals, and have them whisper in Trump's ear and say, don't do this.
Right. And so I want to ask you two things. First, can you assess the government narrative that this is preemptive, that Iran is going to strike first, even though they have repeatedly said they will not, even though they never have, even though nothing has been proven, that they are antagonistic and they continue to show up for talks? So let's break down that narrative. And then I'd like you to respond to this. Here's Marco Rubio just a few minutes ago acknowledging that, yes, this would cost American lives. And how does he make this calculation that it's worth it based on this threat assessment? Watch.
On the issue of our presence in the region, here's the baseline I want to set for everybody. The baseline is this. We have 30 to 40,000 American troops stationed across 8 or 9 facilities in that region. All are within the reach. Theoretically, not theoretically, in reality, all are within the reach of an array of thousands of Iranian one-way UAVs and Iranian short-term ballistic missiles, short-range ballistic missiles that threaten our troop presence. We have to have enough force and power in the region, just on a baseline, to defend against that possibility. That at some point, as a result of something, the Iranian regime decides to strike at our troop presence in the region. The president always reserves the preemptive defensive option. In essence, if we have indications that, in fact, they're going to attack our troops in the region, to defend our personnel in the region. We also have security agreements, the Defense of Israel Plan and others, that require us to have a forced posture in the region to defend against that.
Okay, so that's the dangers, and we're saying, yeah, we're willing to provoke. We've got people in harm's way.
We need enough missiles to just make sure that they don't all get killed.
Well, again, just to remind everybody, Marco Rubio's never served in the United States military and has no clue what it means to serve in the United States military and has no clue what it means to serve in harm's way. I have, others have, and he hasn't. So I'm dismissive of him. I would also remind Marco Rubio that, we, as a member of the United Nations, Congress has yet to revoke that. We haven't withdrawn from the charter. And so we are held to account legally for these actions. Now, it's never bothered us in the past. We've invaded and occupied Iraq, and we've launched other strikes. But it's curious that he starts to articulate the language of international law, speaking of preemption, because we know that under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which calls for legitimate self-defense, that nations can invoke preemptive self-defense. That is a doctrine, founded under constitutional law and international law. The Caroline Affair is an American-British case that the United States Supreme Court weighed in on, and it influences international law to this day. But to use the preemptive excuse, there has to be an imminent threat, and imminent threat is very specifically defined as it's happening now. You don't have time to go to the Security Council, get the Security Council to vote, et cetera. That simply isn't the case. He can't articulate genuine imminence. Second of all, we know that Vladimir Putin has brokered an agreement between Israel and Iran that says neither will attack the other first. So the concept of preemption is absurd. It's been mooted by actual diplomacy. So this is simply Marco Rubio seeking to manufacture a case. I wish there were more people in the United States Congress who would ask questions, since he brought up preemption, to ask questions about the nature of the imminent threat. Now, Rubio would talk about intelligence, and if I were the senator, I would just simply say, then we're going into immediate closed session, and you're going to do it right now, because we're talking about war. And guess what, Marco? You don't get to declare war. The president doesn't get to declare war. Congress gets to declare war. And so before you talk about articulating a case to go to war where Americans are going to die, I mean, that's straight up, Americans are going to die, you need to be very specific about the imminent threat coming out of Iran and what would trigger a preemptive strike. And you better damn well come to Congress before you do it, or we're going to start to impeach people. And we need Congress to get enraged, because we are talking about an existential threat to the health of the American nation.
No one perhaps knows more about going through this inspection process and knowing what a nation is capable of than you, and warning people. I mean, if we had only heeded your warnings in Congress about what Saddam Hussein didn't have, millions of people might still be alive. But they had an agenda. So clearly they have an agenda here. But I want to ask you on this nuclear question specifically, what can intelligence, like what kind of intelligence do we have in the United States with our buddies in Mossad? What can we actually know versus assume in Iran? Meaning, what's the difference between a program, a nuclear weapons program,
nuclear energy,
nuclear capability, and a nuclear weapon?
Yeah.
Well, when we had this conversation or similar conversations in the lead up to the 12-day war, I made it clear that I felt that Iran was making an egregious mistake in enriching uranium to 60%, that Iran had no legitimate reason to do so other than to position itself as a threshold nuclear power. And you back that up with statements made by senior Iranian officials about, that, they could produce a nuclear weapon with a matter of weeks if the supreme leader made the political decision to do so. It becomes problematic. Now, I spoke with the Iranian president and the foreign minister in September, addressed this very issue with them, and they reiterated forcefully that they had no intention, they don't want a nuclear bomb, et cetera. But 60% enriched uranium, solves a lot of the physical processes, and it shortens the timeline, and it makes a more difficult intelligence, problem to be resolved, because to solve this, you've got to have very specific intelligence. There's certain things dealing with infrastructure I don't know exactly how much was destroyed during the bombing. I'm guessing much of it was. The stuff that wasn't destroyed, I'm guessing, has been evacuated. I'm guessing we don't know exactly where this material has been evacuated. But there are certain signatures that are related to reconstitution that we would know if they were reconstituting. And my feeling is that Iran has been focused on reconstituting ballistic missile production capabilities as opposed to reconstituting a nuclear energy program at this point in time. It's no reason to rebuild that which can be readily destroyed. So they're in the process of preserving what they retained, and we don't know exactly how much of that is. This is a long way of saying that I don't believe intelligence exists that fingers Iran to having an active nuclear enrichment program. In fact, I think the intelligence demonstrates clearly that Iran doesn't have an active uranium enrichment program because Iran hasn't been able to reconstitute what we knew to be the totality of their active enrichment program. And there's no evidence of them, reconstituting elsewhere. And so I think the intelligence picture, although muddy, is clearer than one would believe. And I think it's clear that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapons program at this time. I don't believe they ever have been. A lot of people say that because of the attack in June, they have a justification to do so. But even if they tried to make that political justification, I don't believe they have the physical capability, and there's no evidence that they've moved in that direction. What we have here is Donald Trump seeking to compel Iran just to give up on its nuclear program. And Iran's just not going to do that. It's not because they seek to pursue a nuclear weapon. It's because they have made the nuclear enrichment program a symbol of their national pride. It's a right that they have. They've sacrificed for over 2.5 decades to preserve and move forward with this right. And they're just not going to be intimidated into backing down. They have linked this to the existential survival of their nation. And Donald Trump doesn't. Trump is working on behalf of Israel. We have to be honest. I mean, the man all but acknowledged that the $100 million that Miriam Adelson gave him, was Israeli money, and he built a cabinet, the best cabinet that $100 million can buy, of nothing but Zionists who back Israel. Hell, we even put people in like the former deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, who said his number one priority is the security of Israel. The deputy director of the FBI said his number one priority is the security of Israel.
Right.
Well, now I've been debanked because I call this nonsense out.
I want to ask you, yes. So in the recent military strategy document, it says that Israel is a model ally. Everybody else take note. This is exactly what we want from our trade and international partners, which is laughable because this is the model ally that continues to lead us into global wars. I want to ask you, though, because you said that the consequences of this could be utter devastation for this model ally. What does that mean? Do you think Iran has like a tricks up its sleeve that we would not know? And you mentioned cyber warfare, shutting down entire societies. That could very well happen in Israel. Is that what you're saying?
Look, we know that when Stuxnet, the virus originally was deployed against Iran, that there was a follow-on virus. It had a different name, Zeus something. Mm-hmm. And the Iranians found it and repurposed it and sent it back and shut down Aramco, just as a signal of, we know what you're up to. It was the same DNA as the virus we put in there. They made sure that we were able to reverse engineer it and understand what had happened. Iran has some extremely capable cyber tools as well, and they will deploy those. But this will be the physical destruction of Israel. I think we need to remind everybody in your audience that it was Benjamin Netanyahu who picked up the phone, called Donald Trump, and begged him to bring it into this conflict because the Iranians were starting to bring out the good stuff. And again, this shows the restraint of Iran after a surprise attack that attempted to decapitate their leadership, after suffering, significant losses of their military. Iran still didn't go for the kill. Iran was looking for an off-ramp to this fight. And, but in the end, they did deploy missiles, new missiles, that were extraordinarily destructive and extraordinarily accurate, that nothing could shoot down. And Netanyahu finally woke up to the fact that it's over, that if this continues, his country will be destroyed. So he begged Trump to intervene. Iran still has those missiles, and Israel still can't shoot down these missiles. And this is the reality. Israel says they can take 700. That's the message that was sent to the Trump administration. If this war goes forward, we can absorb 700 missiles. Iran's going to hit Israel with thousands. It will be the end of Israel as a modern, viable nation state. It is a small country with limited infrastructure capabilities, and all of this infrastructure will be destroyed by Iran within 3 days of this fight starting. So, again, this is where smart people have to whisper in Trump's ears, don't do this. I mean, if Israel's our model ally, I just want to remind people that Jonathan Pollard spied on behalf of Israel. He worked for the United States Navy. He stole the most sensitive secrets of America, secrets that impacted our national security, gave them to Israel at the direction of Israel, and then Israel, this model ally, gave them to the Soviet Union. And many of these secrets dealt with billion-dollar programs that we were using to monitor Soviet missile capabilities, strategic capabilities that dealt with nuclear war fighting, planning, etc. Jonathan Pollard, an American citizen working on behalf of the Israeli government, stole the most sensitive secrets, gave it to Israel for money, and then Israel sold it to the Soviet. Israel's not an ally. People need to understand that. Israel is not an ally. Israel uses the United States for Israel's purposes, but we're not an ally. Benjamin Netanyahu mocks about how he buys U.S. Congress, how he owns the United States. Israel's been spying on us. When I was back in the intelligence business, we still had a system that had been totally bought out by Israel. And, we had Arabists in the State Department. We had people who cared about America in the Pentagon, and they viewed Israel as the number one threat. Israel is the largest practitioner of espionage on American soil, not China, not Russia, not Iran. Israel is the largest practitioner of espionage targeting the United States of America, operating on American soil, and they're our model ally.
Well, I mean, that's what a battered wife would say. My husband's amazing, right? So this tracks, this model ally bit.
Well, don't you hate when people say, I told you so? Yeah, that's me, actually, because I did tell you, sorry, but I told you that gold and silver were going to reap the benefits of excessive money printing, the Fed just printing money like crazy, overvalued markets, global unrest. It's here. It's happened. Gold and silver have both soared to all-time highs. So I hope you called our friends at Lear Capital and you bought some. If you didn't, trust me, it's not too late. Experts are predicting even higher prices ahead. And they get it. They know what's coming. Isn't it time, folks? Get yourself some gold and silver today. Call the best in the business. I personally use them. So does Natalie. We both do. And our kids do as well in their IRAs. Lear Capital, it's a free phone call. There's no obligation to purchase, just education information on protecting and growing your wealth with gold and silver. I'm sure there are many of you that have called and haven't purchased yet for whatever reason. Don't make the same mistake twice. Now is the time to get some gold shipped directly to you or shift some dollars in your retirement accounts over to physical gold and silver. It's easy to do. Natalie and I have done it for both, and I've been extremely satisfied with Lear's knowledge, their service, their prices. I urge you to call today and learn more. Call them, 1-800-613-3557. Or go to learredacted.com, and you can receive up to $20,000 in free bonus medals with a qualified purchase.
I'd like to move on to Cuba, talking about Cuba, because this is what President Trump said on Tuesday, kind of joking. They're going to fall soon. It looks a little bit diabolical. Watch.
Well, we're going to see what happens with Cuba. I don't know. Anybody interested in Cuba in this room? Not too many people. This is not a Cuba room, but that's all right. There are plenty of them around, especially in Miami. And Cuba will be failing pretty soon. Cuba is really a nation that's very close to failing. They got their money from Venezuela. They got the oil from Venezuela. They're not getting that anymore.
We were talking about the polls earlier. Clearly, you're...
Okay, what is this about? Well, obviously, Cuba is under long-standing trade embargoes, which means they have to do workarounds to get oil. Historically, Cuba has got their oil from Venezuela and Mexico. Now we cut them off from Venezuela. Now we told Mexico, you cut them off too, because we want to inflict maximum suffering on their people to erect a regime change. Now Mexico said, we're not going to do that. We do what we want. but they did that. Here's proof of that. China has condemned this action, saying that this is depriving the people of Cuba their rights to subsist and develop. Why would China care? Well, because China and Cuba are trading partners, and the U.S. sees that as broader regional contest between Washington and Beijing. So could that be the real reason that we want to harm Cuba? And I want to show you this, Scott, as well. The new Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine basically says, in this hemisphere, we do whatever the F we want. And they use the word prerogative. If we think someone's getting popular here, someone's exerting influence, we do what we want according to our prerogatives. So can you translate why we want to torture Cuba? Why are we doing this? What is in our interest?
Well, there's a couple things, but I think we need to just get down to brass tacks. Marco Rubio. Since Marco Rubio became a senator, he has been singularly focused on Cuba. His father came from Cuba, or his father or grandfather came from Cuba, a Batista man. And Rubio has, he's from that Cuban American community that, basically the only thing that gives them relevance is their insistence on, anti-communist policies, and they leverage that into, significant political power. He's now, the Secretary of State, but more importantly, he's the National Security Advisor. He's dual-hatted. That means that he doesn't just, make and implement foreign policy. He's the man responsible for coordinating foreign policy with covert policy, the CIA's activities, et cetera. But Marco Rubio is the man who gave us Venezuela, and he's the man who's focused on Cuba. He's the man who's focused on, having American domination of the entire South American continent, all of Latin America, and this is why we're singling Cuba out. Yes, we have the Trump corollary. Yes, we have the national security strategy, but the reality is we're talking about, this is Marco Rubio's pet project. This is his pathway to the presidency. This is how he sees he's going to claim the White House in 2028. This is Marco Rubio's private war. Cuba poses no threat to the United States whatsoever. And the fact that Cuba trades with China and Russia and Venezuela is primarily driven by the fact that Cuba doesn't trade with the United States, but that's not a decision Cuba makes. That's a decision the United States makes because of its sanctions. Can we collapse the Cuban economy? We've been trying for decades. Does Donald Trump have a plan that's going to work? We shall see. But I just think that Cuba's going to be a tougher nut than Donald Trump thinks it is. This is a man who continually goes for the quick kill, the cheap kill, but he's not willing to have a knockdown, drag out fight.
So if this were an SAT question, we could frame it like this: Hillary Clinton is to Libya what Marco Rubio is to Cuba, right? Cuba. So both launching wars and utter destruction on the civilian population for their own political gain.
Correct. Except I just don't think we're going to succeed in Cuba. I think Cuba has far more resilience than Libya did.
Yes, what we just ran here was the protest today against foreign intervention. This is what you're seeing. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, look, I just, I've never been to Cuba. I can't claim to be, an expert on Cuba, but I've just studied history, and I know that from the Bay of Pigs until today, we've been trying to get rid of the Cuban government, and we haven't succeeded. So I don't know if Donald Trump and Marco Rubio have the magic solution. They talk as if they do, but I just want to point out that even after we got rid of Maduro, we don't control Venezuela.
No.
And that point should be made. Venezuela is not under our control. We can sanction Venezuela, we can blockade Venezuela, but as things stand, the Venezuelan government is still the Venezuelan government. It has been, unless the CIA has executed covert contracts with everybody and they're secretly doing the bidding, which is always a possibility. We haven't, finalized the Venezuela situation, and I think it's a little premature to assume American victory over Cuba.
The CIA, this has been like the crown jewel. They've been hoping for this for decades in Cuba. They failed at every turn, from exploding cigars to God knows what else that they've been involved with. I mean, there's like museums dedicated to their failures in Cuba. How active do you think the intelligence community is in Cuba in the way it has been so active inside of Venezuela for the last few decades?
I think it's extraordinarily active, but I also think that the points of leverage or the points of access in Cuba are not as extensive as they were in Venezuela. Venezuela has, of course, the oil business that produces oligarchs who are politically and economically influential, and the United States has been owning these people for decades, and they never really lost their place or position in Venezuela, so we were able to exploit the elites. Cuba is, communist country, and while I do believe that we have penetrated Cuba, I mean, the CIA is hard at work doing their job. I believe that the Cuban government is largely insulated from the kind of, penetration that took place in Venezuela, and I just think it's going to be a much more difficult target than Donald Trump and Marco Rubio are trying to sell to the American people.
Scott Ritter, hey, with 30 seconds left, I mean, just on the Iran question real quick to wrap it, do you think that an attack is imminent?
What odds on
No.
it?
No.
No.
And the reason why I say no is we're going to get our asses kicked. And it's obvious we're going to get our asses kicked. And I'm just convinced that somebody's going to bring this up to Trump and say, if you attack Iran, you will lose the midterms and you will spend the second half of your administration being impeached, and you may actually get convicted and you will go to jail. Don't do this.
Yikes. There's the personal consequence.
That's Scott's way of being half glass full.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm.
All right.
I hope you're right.
Get out of here, you optimist, you.
Yeah. Scott, thank you so much as always. Great analysis and insight. No one I'd rather talk to on this. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for having me.